If you've ever wanted to learn how to transform heavy emotions like self-doubt and fear into self-love and joy, then you won't want to miss this next episode of the New Earth podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Alana Light, and I am thrilled to be able to introduce to you my next guest, Nicolette Amato, who is everything from a channel, a medium, a psychic, a Pilates instructor, a Reiki healer, a published author, a poet, even a senior vice president in an HR team. And right now you're like, how does she do all these things? Well, she does go into that, and she's given us such great information. And here she actually gives you a roadmap of how not only to use your body when it's being a messenger for those heavy emotions, but how once you're actually in those emotions of self-love and joy, how that is you standing in your power, and you can use that kind of energy for creation. And that's our gateway for stepping into our intuition and tapping into the divine messaging that's already all around you, just waiting to be heard. And she actually demonstrates that on the video in real time, where she drops into her intuition and taps directly into my energy field to be able to point out where there are still blocks that are opportunities for my own growth. So you'll not want to miss this episode. It's changed my life, and I know it'll change yours as well. You're certainly one of my all-time favorite intuitives. And I need to talk about the reading that you gave me, because it's so mind-blowing. And also Bob, who I thought about last night, came to me in my dream. But we'll talk about
Whoa,
this.
okay, that's
Yeah,
so
yes,
interesting.
yes. That's why I'm like, let me hit record right the hell now and just start getting
And
all
we'll
this.
figure out how it all ties in
Yeah,
at
yeah,
some
it'll all be
point.
pieced together. But how I had texted you yesterday about, like, we are receiving such unbelievable surges of light that we have never received before, just for the purposes of upgrading humanity on a global level. And it's happening spiritually, it's happening physically. Folks are seeing that our gene codes are being upgraded. Like, if we're open to this, what essentially this is us being the receiver of our higher being down into our bodies, which I know we talked about in the prep call. This is us receiving spirit into us. And we talked about the tower moments, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people that aren't really aware of all that's going on within themselves and how to transcend it on a regular basis.
It's hard too, even
It's
when you
hard.
are aware, right? Like the
Yes,
tower
even if you're
moments,
aware,
even
it's
when you're
hard.
aware, the tower moments crack you
Yes.
open. That's like the most beautiful thing I see. It's like the tower card has become one of my favorite cards in tarot
Mm.
because I've learned that it lets the light in. So
Yes.
like all that it's
Yes.
breaking down and all that you think, that's hard. You're losing parts of your identity, your beliefs, what
Yes.
you thought was true.
Yes.
That's a lot of change. That's very uncomfortable. But once it happens and you just surrender, as hard as that is, I'm not going to deny that
Yes.
is not difficult. But so much more comes in
Oh my God, yes.
because of that. And I know, I
Yes.
hope that that's something that if someone's going through that and listening to this, it's that validation of like, it will get better. And it's
Yes.
not, most of the time, it's not what you expect it to be. So as long as you're kind of open to that, I actually wrote down somewhere, I feel like my notes are all over the place, but it's like, just it will find us not where we expect. And I could send you a picture of this because I literally wrote this before, right? And then it was like being in that receiving energy. So what was happening
Yes.
to me was I felt the need to clean my space before I came. Like, I don't know what it was. It was like, clean, go here. And I'm just like, I'm just gonna go with it. And I was looking for things, and then I wasn't finding it where I thought I was going to find it. And the minute I said, okay, hold on a second, what's the message here? It was that it will find us not where we expect. When I went to someplace else that I normally wouldn't go, then I found the thing I was looking for. And so it's so random, but there are those little kind of nudges that when we just kind of let go of what we think it should be or how it should happen,
Right. Right.
it's pleasantly surprising. And those tower moments are those that are going to force us to realize that, whether we
Oh,
like it or
yes.
not.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
they're there to shake us out of that, of
Yes.
those deep rooted beliefs that are just, it's hard to without that. And
Yes.
the other thing I think that helped me through that is knowing like that's sent from our guides or that's sent from the universe. And when I looked at it from that perspective of, okay, they're doing this for me, I don't understand it. I think we talked last time in the prep call. That was me in a church like a couple months ago where it was a very, very dark time. And I just was brought to a church and I started crying and said, all right, like I surrender now. Like this is,
Yes.
I'm hitting it. Like I don't know what to do. And literally within the next week, things just started to twist for the better in a way I didn't expect. Right. And so once I said that and I felt like I talked and said, okay, like I'm telling you, I am embracing that I am no longer in control right now.
That's it. That's it.
And it changes everything.
Yeah, that receiving mode, I love that you said that because that's absolutely the energy that spirit needs to come down into your body because spirit is going to love you no matter what. The question is how much are you allowing spirit to love you and you're perfect as you are. And that's where the surrender comes in is knowing that all the things that are coming to you from the universe as love and is meant to be solely for the purposes of serving you. And I think that we get really bogged down in rationalizing it and kind of understanding all that's happening when for me the true meaning of surrender is just allowing spirit to come in, allowing the light to come in, being okay with not really knowing exactly what you're turning into, like
For sure.
actually understanding all of the process because that frees you up to expansively become something that you've never known you could ever be before.
So it's actually funny because I know we talk a lot of times like we're very into the spiritual realm, but there's many individuals that are just dabbling in it or not sure if those words
Right.
resonate with them. And I was drawn to a book before I came, so I wrote it down. And you're talking a lot about love, but it's not just the love from, the universe or divine, it's self-love, right? And so the book that I was drawn to pick
Yes.
up was How to Be the Love You Seek. And
Yes.
the page that I went to, and you said about how, it's allowing that in, but feeling it and knowing, and how do we know it? How does that show
How?
up? And
Yes.
the page that it opened up to was 138, and it talks about the emotions, what that feels, and what the message is. And so I think it's
Mm.
also, I think we're drawn to talk about it for those that are going through these tower moments. It's
Yes.
what sitting in our bodies, the mind body connection. That's like
Mm.
something that I've learned is my space of life as a coach is I'm becoming a Pilates instructor. I have, I'm dabbling into mental health. It's all connected, like mind, body,
It's
and soul,
all.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
And through those tower moments, knowing the emotion, understanding what that is, and having a cheat sheet like this, I could send a picture from this book
Oh, I would
if
love
that's a
that.
helpful
Yeah,
resource. But it
that would
says,
be
so for
amazing.
example, it says the emotion is anger. What does that feel like? Muscle
Yes.
tension, a flushed
Right.
face, clenched jaw. You might not even know you're angry, but like your
Right.
body is telling you deep down what it's experiencing. And then
Right.
the message, boundary violation or unmet need.
Oh my God,
So what is
that's
not
so
being met?
good.
And I think that's helpful in those moments because I think when I was surrendering, it's like I did not realize how
Mm.
much I was holding inside. I didn't realize how
Mhm.
deep this went. I thought I was just grieving. I thought that it was, a present moment
Right.
thing, which I'm going to blow your mind again. I have two candles that I picked out. One is present, so it's like we're in the present. We think we know what's kind of happening and like we're living it. And the other candle that I have on the right side of me is my autumn candle from Seasons to Bloom. And that's all about reflecting on the lessons. And so it's actually like what's
It's
happening to
that.
us right now,
Oh my God.
but what is the lesson that it's teaching? What is that
Right.
deeper?
Right.
What's the deeper? And that's what these tower moments are, right? So we could feel like it's just like right now or a moment in time. And it is, it does pass, but what is it
Right.
teaching us to move forward?
Yes.
What are we recognizing? How are we, as hard as it is, grateful for that moment? I
Yeah.
wasn't in that, I wasn't right then and there, but afterwards I will tell you that I'm so grateful for that moment and it's a defining moment in my life.
Right.
And so it's just interesting how I'm looking at the candles and why I chose
Wow.
those two and how it tied
But
everything.
you're so spot on because you can never receive love if you haven't allowed yourself to first experience self-love. Because you wouldn't be a vibrational match to that energy that's coming in inside of you. You would be the opposite. You would be kind of like that repellent energy. So like I love that you said that because I feel like it's like every single thing that comes to us as love from the universe might not feel like it. Right. So like the toolkit that kind of you're talking about is to kind of like become fluent in the languaging of the body, understand like what part of the body is communicating some kind of emotion, like it represents, and then using that to be able to kind of like troubleshoot, well that's somewhere that I'm blocked from self-love.
And what does self-love mean for each person? A lot of
Right.
times we don't realize what that is or the experiences that we've had. Um, it's all important. And by
Yes.
just showing up as ourselves is what's going to do that. Like sometimes you could hear that there's a big shift and it feels daunting or it's overwhelming. Or I know for myself, the other messages that were coming through. And I think if we keep talking, the messages are just going to kind of check off, I think is how it's
I'm
typically how it
sure that's
works
gonna, oh, see, I didn't have
when
to
I
send you any
channel.
questions at all. We could have just done it.
Exactly. I didn't even look at the questions.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't
I'm
have time to
sure.
check
I know.
anything.
I'm like, we
I
don't
didn't
even
have
need,
time.
yeah.
Um, but what I was kind of looking at was I lost my train of thought for a second. That's
Your
very weird.
next channeled message about the self-love. Like it's meant to
Yeah,
come in so that we have the learning of self-love.
self-love. But I wonder sometimes I'm like when it stops my train of thought, it's that moment of like of pause. I don't know. It's very interesting why it's
Like a,
pausing, why it's and I'm feeling a lot of like it's like here.
mm,
It's third eye energy. It's
mhm.
very like, oh, maybe that's like a validation of like what that is to come. It's like I'm very distracted from what it is. It could also be a reminder of if you're getting that feeling or if there's distraction, it's taking me back to the blue light. Um, and something there's like something letting your it's like letting your hair down. This is very
Mm.
weird. Yeah, very, very weird. I'm like drawn to this painting and I'm not sure why. Maybe it'll make sense to you, but I keep being drawn to like, um, why is this happening? Like the hair part and like letting it down, letting it show. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Um, hmm.
What I feel is what was happening in the prep call. And it's the same kind of thing of you and I aligning kind of like vibrationally. And at the time, I think I was having a really hard time letting my higher being in
Hmm.
and trusting that I could actually receive the messaging into my third eye. And all I needed to do was surrender. And
Oh,
since then, I've been doing that, hence all the tower moments. But
interesting.
it started to happen in the call with you where you took on my headache and I started to feel better. And you started to tell me how validated I should feel for what my energy is able to do for people from a frequency perspective, because you were like, oh my God, now I get it. Every time I lose my train of thought, there's like a blackout, like kind of a blankness, because and then you were like, oh my God, I think that's what you do when you guide people through meditation, is that you're able to just like clear their mind. And that allows them when they come back to have a different perspective on it, which i.e. means their frequency has in some way been adjusted. And
Yeah,
so first off, I have to
I feel
thank
that.
you for that validation, because that changed my life since then. I mean, it really has.
Everything.
No, it really has. And so I needed to learn to trust my lower self, because I wouldn't even allow all that in that you're talking about, because I've lived for such a long time, I think not trusting my lower self. And
I
now
think
I'm,
that people needed to hear, I think people need to hear your experience to relate to that. And it connects to
yeah,
the self-doubt, right? Like in that moment, what this brought up for me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it
no,
brought
that's
up
okay.
like, you know, when you get like stage fright for a second, when
Mhm.
I had that moment of stop, I started being like, oh my God, we're recording. And like, what am I saying? I don't know what's going on, but I needed to surrender and it needed
Mhm.
to jog your mind, but also know like it's what's coming out is meant to be. There's no need to be nervous when you are yourself and in alignment and the right people will find you. And I think that needed to be shown here of like, we also had a pause. For me, it was uncomfortable, but nobody might have even experienced that because I was so in my own head. And in the past, I would have let that derail
Yeah.
everything. But look at the beautiful exchange where it was like, No, we
Mm.
just kind of went with it and followed
Yes.
it
Yes.
and said, and you said the same thing. It's like, we don't need to have that doubt. I've learned not to have that. I've
Right.
learned that it's going to be okay and just stand in that
Right.
power. And I feel like it's also a side of like, don't let one moment define anyone listening. It's like,
Right.
there's going to be those moments. That one moment doesn't define any of us or our talent. How many times do we say like we had a bad, where, as coaches or teachers, becoming a Pilates instructor, I'm like so nervous to teach and make a mistake. It's like you're going to.
Yeah,
So
yeah, of
like
course.
that
Of
doesn't
course.
define if what we view as a mistake might not be somebody else's, or it's
Yeah.
all learning. It's all part of
Oh
that like
yeah. Oh yeah.
lessons. I don't know. That's something that just came through to make sure of like just allow it to kind of stay true to your dream. And then the other thing I wrote was be open to adapting to get there. So
Mm.
we could plan it out as much as possible. We planned this podcast 3 different ways. We came in today, didn't read any of the questions, right? It's like
Right.
we still are
Right.
true to what we believe and want to talk about, but it's that adaptability to, you know what, if we're getting this message and this feeling, we're going to pause and say, okay, let's shift. And I think, hearing that sometimes is validating to know that's okay.
Oh yeah. No, but I want for you to know that ever since I spoke to you then, my headaches for the most part disappeared. And I completely changed the way that I do this podcast. I changed the way that I speak, that I create videos. Like I mean, it was that transformative to the point that I feel like what you're feeling now is what I'm allowing myself to feel, which is the knowing that I'm worthy of having an open third eye and receiving the information and to trust my entire being that I will uplift humanity with it and serve.
You absolutely will. And you always were. And it kind of goes into that couch reference. Maybe that's also why I was drawn to like the pause or like that line of staying true to your dream, but be open to adapting how you get there. It was
Yeah,
the same thing. Remember, you saw that couch and
yes.
that vision from your grandma, I think it was. And you're there and you're kind of just like scrambling for all the tools. And it's like you just need to kind of sit and relax on the couch and let it come to you,
And
right?
just
Like
let it,
you have it. You
yeah,
have it. Just kind of be present. Just kind of don't think about it. Even I think that was a tool for me, right? Of like, yes, I have these notes, but in that moment, something told me, yes, you have that as a guide, but just
yeah,
listen to what is coming through right now and allow each of us to just feel what needs to be said, what feels right, what doesn't. And some things will resonate and some things won't. And that's completely okay. And that's the beauty of this collective shift is it's going to feel like doesn't always make sense,
right,
actually. In the book
right.
I was reading too, it's funny. I'm trying to remember, think again, it's called. They talk about how the idea of constantly adapting, those are the people that are most successful, those
Oh
that are
yeah,
able to say, like they change their
yeah.
mind frequently. And people can get frustrated by that. But it's if you're changing your mind, but you're still very clear on your path forward, that's the best way to do it because
Oh yeah,
you're learning, you're engaging, you're changing, you're adapting, and the universe works the same way, right? They're sending us
yes.
different messages at different times to help us kind of usher that forward, but it's never going to look the same. And the
No,
quicker we kind of
no,
go with the flow and feel that, and it's hard. Even now, I was fighting doing that,
right,
right?
right. It's
Or you were
uncomfortable.
too, right? It's like
That's an
I want the
yeah,
podcast like this.
yeah,
I think this is
yes,
best, and it's like I've
yes,
I've caught myself when I say I think this is best. I'm like, oh, that's probably not best. Like that's my new thing. I catch because that's the
yes,
ego. That's my
yes.
mind and
Exactly,
my
exactly.
old self and that experience and that humanness like telling me it's like, is anything ever really the best way? Like what's right now? What is my body telling me?
Exactly. I feel like we are like a personification of surrendering to our higher beings in this moment. Like, where you do have that one side of you that's like, no, we have to get through this kind of line of questioning. And then there's another side of you that's actually, I felt like you were just holding space for me again. And you were receiving exactly like what I'm up to now. And especially with the blue light piece, because I feel like all night long, that's all that I dreamt was that I was being flooded with it, and then I'm worthy of loving myself, which speaks to what you said before, enough to receive it into like every single part of my body, all of my cells, and to lead with that, and that's kind of what we're shifting into. Like I feel like that's exactly what you just did. That's the same exact energy, and you started resonating with it, which is so beautiful because it's so pure and it's so what we are about because we are an interconnected web and we don't have to show up any other way but that.
No. And that's the
Yeah.
hardest thing is by figuring, and that's what it's kind of like. I feel like you start with the self-love, then you move
Yeah.
into the,
Yeah.
receiving in general and that, that purpose. At least that was my journey. I feel like there was like different
Yeah.
stages, but the first thing I had to unlearn the most was, that comparison. On my walk this morning, the first kind of
Oh
messages
yeah.
that were coming through. So it started this morning. I felt like I was channeling and I was on my walk, and in New York, it's cold today. And it's kind of weird. We had nice weather and now it's cold. And
Yeah.
on my walk, I noticed, there are trees that are completely blooming for like fall, like beautiful, like fall
Yeah.
colors. And then there's like others that already bloomed, or there's some that are in between. And I'm looking at it and I immediately was like, oh, I want to take a picture of the beautiful one. Like, I want to say, I want
Right.
that for
Just the
myself.
pretty one. Yeah.
And I thought about it, and a couple things came up of one, that comparison of I wanted that for myself. I want what I see from others. And it was like,
Yeah.
ooh, what is that? What is that bringing up? Right. And I think the
Right.
message it was trying to tell me is one, we all bloom at different times. It's
Yes.
all in our own time. And
Yes.
the other is that we can love that. We could say like, oh, that's amazing, but
Mm,
know that that's for someone else, and be very in awe of that, but also staying true to what feels good. I think we could get distracted sometimes, like, oh, that's working really well, or a lot of times like, oh, how did they reach success? Let me mimic that. And
right.
sometimes there's things that
Right.
you might want to learn from. I'm not saying that, but it really kind of taught me of like, it's also okay to stay on my own path. It is also okay to do things differently. It is also
Yes.
okay to um forge something new, even if people don't understand.
Yes.
I was having
Yes.
conversation with my boyfriend yesterday, and it was one of those things where he's like, I'm so happy for people, but sometimes I'm like, why didn't it happen for me yet? Like,
Mhm.
I don't understand. And I was like, because it wasn't the time. Like, there
Mhm.
was something that we were meant to, and then something else popped up where I sent him of like, you're meant to do it with somebody else.
Right.
And you needed
Right.
that person, like for him, it was one of those validations of like, this needed to happen together, and you're supposed to do that with someone else. And so,
Right.
although the answer might not seem clear, that was another, I think, big lesson
Yeah.
of, we all have that unique path and purpose, to own that, to love that. And that's the first kind of step. And when comparison comes up, it's so hard not to.
So
Um,
hard.
See what that brings up. I think it was very like humbling to see what that brought up for me of like, oh, why am I so drawn to the one tree? What
Right.
about the path? Literally, right. It took me all, I was looking this way versus right in front of me.
Right. Right. It's yeah, it's so true and we're bombarded with ways to compare to look at, how far another person made it, quote,
Right.
versus, where you think you should already be by now. And I've talked about that so often with Mo, with my husband, because I think that would be the one thing that keeps us from being in any way our greatest potential is thinking that we were supposed to already be it by now.
So it's very funny. One of the things, so I'm just gonna, as it comes up, I'm just gonna share the message that I
Yes.
pulled beforehand. So I was very drawn to my watch, but it's not to wear the watch. It was like to
Mhm.
leave the watch where I'm looking at the watch. And what I had wrote was, and I'm trying to find, remove the restriction of time. So it was making me
Yes.
look at the
Yes.
watch and say, remove the restriction of time. The amount of times in every reading, it's like a reminder of time as a human construct. I'm like a
Yes.
broken record with saying that because I need to hear it so frequently of time is made up technically. Like it is, they talk about when you astral travel, you're in many places in time, right? Like you're moving on this continuum. And so it was that idea of like take the restriction off. Time is different for every individual, and that is really hard when our day to day, work and structure, and when you have activities
Right.
and
Right.
all, birthdays and things that make you think that. But it was a very strong like, remove that restriction, feel
Oh
free
yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And it's in looking at both the messages that were coming through, it's just the idea of trying to remain as focused. There's going to be so many
Mhm.
distractions.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, it's taking me back to the tower moment Tower moments bring us back. They reset us from those distractions. So it's another way if people are going through a tower moment to think of a
And just,
tower
I'm sorry
moment.
to interrupt, but explain what
Please
a
do.
tower moment is in case there's people that do not know what that
Sure.
is. Yeah.
So how I view a tower moment, at least, is it's an experience that is usually quite unexpected, brings rapid change, and shakes you to your core. I look at it as breaking the foundation, right? So when I think of a tower, I bring it back to tarot cards. You know, the image is of the tower literally crumbling from the ground,
Mm,
shaking the foundation so something new can come in and grow. And so when we talk about that, it's usually something that is just so, so extreme. So for myself, my recent tower, it's also many times a series of moments, not one.
right,
Um,
right.
so mine was a series. I had lost a very good friend in a way that was just really hurtful. I felt that, you know, there was a couple things at work that were happening all at once that really also affected my like mental health and like, am I worthy?
Mm,
I had lost two people within a week of each other, witnessing one kind of pass in front of the family. And so it was like a back to back to back.
right.
Is and it brought up old grief as well.
Yeah.
Like it was a time suicide prevention month. So it was around September. So it was also that kind of grief. And so that's kind of an example of my personal tower moment where it's
Yeah.
really culmination of moments that really just kind of re-pick up the foundation or whatever maybe needs to come up to be healed or
Mm,
revisited. It's what happened today. My phone crumbling down. So it's like I pictured what happened today was I was trying to like do my hair and my phone just like fell to the floor, but it was so dramatic. And like that's what that kind of feels like. It's like a
yeah.
dramatic
Yeah.
slow motion
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah. Like
moments.
it hits every step on the way down.
It
Like,
hits every, that's what it was like. And I think
yeah.
maybe that's why it
Yeah.
happened was to kind of give that depiction of like,
Right.
that's what that kind of feels like, right? It's
Right.
like you can't keep your head up um in the moment. And it got to the point at the end of that tower moment for me was in that church, crying my eyes out and saying, okay, like I surrender now. Like, oh, what's next, right? Like, what
Right.
do I do? I need
Right.
help.
Right.
Admitting I needed help, and I don't know where to go. That is also completely okay. I don't think we say that enough of like
Yeah.
nobody knows everything, right?
Yeah.
Like we could channel and it's like everything I say tomorrow I might have new thoughts or a new way of thinking and that's okay. That's part of this shift is like continuing to be open, changing our minds, coming up with new ideas, following where that leads us. There's no, I know for myself, it's like if I believe this or I thought this, it has to be that way. And that is definitely not the case.
Yes, it's so well, we've kind of been in like a training program from the early years that you find one thing that you love, you stick with it, and the kind of most efficient way to live your life would be to just only ever just do that and get to the top and be the best, and when in actuality, we as humans are not built to be just like a single discipline kind of individual. We have, cross-functional loves, and like all of our greatest philosophers, for example, like they were astronomers, they were musicians, they were architects, they were heads of state, they studied science, like they only became philosophers when they were able to compare and contrast all of that subject matter. And so when you shut yourself off like that and you just say, no, I rigidly started off on this and I'm not going to get off of it because if I do, it's almost like inefficient or something,
Right.
then you
Well,
close
you
yourself
feel a
off to
little
like,
judged. There's the comparison
yeah,
again, right? Of like, are people
yes,
kind of question you of like, is that going to work? That seems
right,
weird. That seems out of
right,
place. Or you would do that. You would give up something so stable to go.
right,
That's the common one, right? I was
right,
talking to somebody else and they're debating what they want to do. And it's like every time they bring it up, it's like, but that's so, why would you do that? And it's like,
right.
no, none of us are in anybody's shoes to know where our hearts are called and aligned. And I think that's one of my biggest like passions in life. And like one of the
Mm,
things I love coaching, besides doing like messages, is that like, what is your innate talents? What lights you up inside? The more
right,
that you follow that, the more successful you will be in whatever you want to do. And
Yes.
why do we need to be in one role? I do so many things. Like every time I talk to someone, they're like, you do that too? Yes. Like I am an
Yes.
HR professional. I work, in HR. I am a coach. I am a channeler. I'm a poet. I'm a Pilates instructor. Why can't I be? But when I started out, it's like, everyone's like, that's a lot. And it's like, but is it? Like, it's really not to me. And
Right.
it feels
Right.
like more like myself, like the pieces of me
Yes.
falling into place. Like, I truly feel like we think we're one puzzle piece. I love
Yeah.
the puzzle piece analogy, but we're not. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many things we're looking for in
So
life to fill
many.
that up. Like, and it's not just relationships or families or the traditional kind of, routes that people add to that. It's anything that lights them up inside. That might, we might not even,
Yes.
what's coming on my feed lately is people that don't want to get married or don't want to have kids and like
Right.
normalizing that. Like that's a puzzle piece that's just not part of their puzzle. And like
Right.
normalizing that it's different for each person
Yeah.
and helping people find what that is, just it brings me so much joy.
I love that you're saying all of that because you're so incredibly you're an inspiration because there are so few people that are living that way. Because I think everyone believes that everything that you just said is exhausting, right? And even if you ask someone what do they love to do, because they're so not used to doing what they love, and we've been so kind of trained to just say yes to something just for the sake of being practical, that we've put all that on the wayside ever since we were kids. And
Yeah.
so very few people even know what it is that brings them that sense of joy, that lights them up, that lets them feel that kind of passion. And then when they do eventually figure it out, they're not necessarily comfortable enough or brave enough to actually execute on it because we've been in such a place of fear for
Or
essentially
they don't
like
know how.
yeah,
I
centuries.
find
Yes.
that you don't
They,
know
they
how,
don't know
right?
how.
Which
Yes.
is so interesting.
Yes.
You're actually helping me because I've been like, I do all these things. I'm like, how does it make sense, right? Because I have the
Yeah.
corporate background
Yeah.
of like, how do you put that
Right.
into practice? And then I have this like spiritual background, and it's making sense now, right? You first uncover it, and then I'm going to go help you figure out how do you apply that in the real world. So thank you for the personal, the
And
personal
that's
clarity.
what I was going to ask you is exactly that. Like, how do you do that? Because like we all know like the answer is like you're in a flow state. Like I can see you right now and I can feel you right now as being in a flow state, right? You're open to receiving messaging. You're open to, like sharing it. Your throat chakra is open. You're creating even in a tactile way. You're making art, all different kinds of things. So like how did you first cultivate that? And how do you balance that between the two kind of, worlds that you kind of hurdle
It's
or
not
straddle? I think the
easy.
word straddle.
Straddle,
Yeah.
hurdle. I mean, I got what
Or
you mean, but
both.
it's
Maybe it's
fun.
both.
It's funny that you say that though, because I think what it is it's through the hurdles or through those different moments that I had, I started picking up like those talents, those skills, right?
Mhm.
So it was, at work, there was a series of events that allowed me the opportunity to kind of step up or strengthen that like HR skill set.
Yeah.
Then there was, going through the grief of losing somebody to suicide was opening myself up to like, okay, how do I navigate grief and how do I talk about such an important topic that's impacting so many people? How do I pay that forward? How do I carry Bobby's? So there was that instance. So I think it's look at the moments that are happening and then like what do you want to do from like what is it calling you to do from that, and it's kind of like
Mhm.
as I look back each moment helped me cultivate a different skill set or made me interested in something or it sparked something in me to follow that. And I know in the pre-call, so there's the experiences, it's also like what are you drawn to learn, like the books I mentioned to you, it's Light is the New Black, right? It had so many different like tools in there that just got me to think differently at that time of my life, which was around the same of both of those experiences I referenced. And it asked me just deep questions, right? Like meaning of my name, we've talked about, right? Like it makes sense now. Or the other thing I dove into when I had a different coach was human design. My
Mhm.
human design, if I like went through it with you, which I became certified to do like basic, I do like basic kind of
I
explanation, then
love
I'll like
that.
send
Yeah.
people to the
I know
school.
mine. Yeah. I feel like that was a very, very valuable piece
It's
of info.
eye-opening. And
Yeah.
the more
Yeah.
that you go in, so like one of the things I learned is I have all of my chakras defined, which is something that even the coach was like, okay, like this is interesting. And what it means is I just have a very specific way of doing things where
Mm.
I used to think of that as I'm stubborn or, I'm
Mm.
inflexible, but it's my energy and my makeup. And the more that I learn to appreciate that and know how to leverage it, that also helped on my journey to pay that forward to somebody else. So it's just kind of
Right, right.
looking at each experience. What do you want to take from that? How do you want to pay that forward? I think that's what kind of helps me navigate that in those tools, right? Whether
That's
it's an
amazing.
assessment, a book, a
Right,
podcast, the people
right.
that you meet. Every
Yeah.
time we have a conversation, we you just help me figure out how I want to market my brand a little bit better, right? So it's like also allowing yourself to have
I
those
love that.
connections, and be open to different ways of thinking. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep referencing that book, Think Again, because it's
Yeah.
so interesting why I was drawn to that book to read before we had this call, because there's so many tidbits of, it talks about I have OCD. It's definitely much better, but during 2020, that was very hard. And it was like
Mm.
very restricting. From the most obvious one people will understand is the like germ contamination,
Oh
locking myself
yeah.
in the room,
Yeah.
hand washing, very extreme, getting very, to that point. That was one aspect of my OCD. And it talked in there about the mind being a dictator in the book. And I sat there and said, our minds can be a dictator at times, whether
Oh
it's that
yeah.
extreme
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
And I think just coming into our body more through the experiences is another thing that helps us in those moments of when our ego is getting in the way, that allows us to kind of find that balance between all the things that we
Yeah.
want to do. So that's a
How
very
do
long-winded
you do
answer.
that? Yeah, I'm like now tell us how you do it. Like what are your kind of go-to steps of getting into your body?
Oof.
Is it a good one,
Yeah,
right?
that's
I feel like
that's a
everyone
good one.
needs
That's
to know that.
hard. And it's finding it for yourself. I'm always going to tell,
Mm.
like, I'm a big
Yeah. Yeah.
believer in like figuring what works for you and what doesn't. For me, especially because of the way mine works, it's been like a 4-year journey. It's 111 on 11/22 right now. That's very big validation, but it's a journey. It's like
Love
a
it.
long journey, and
Yeah.
embracing that. I'm in therapy weekly. I think that is the one of the biggest things that's very helpful, and like removing all the thoughts that sometimes build up in that place is huge. And however you want to use it in that way. But for me, being able to have that outlet and I mean, we were talking about something where I was angry about something, and it wound up as we talked, it was something so much deeper
Mm.
than the initial kind of surface. And we went
Mm.
so deep, right? And that did not happen when I first started therapy, right? That is 4 years of therapy where I'm finally able
Right.
to peel back the layers.
Right.
So that's something that does help me get into my body, because when I remove the thoughts or I kind of get out of my head and I kind of silence that, it makes it much easier to go
Mm.
downward for me. I think I sage a lot. I have my little sage spray. I think
I have purchased and finished that spray and I should get another one.
I finished. So that's a new one, which is
I
funny. I
love
feel
it.
today is a lot of new beginnings, right? So clean and refreshed. It's like
Yeah.
that was another message coming through. So I sage a lot. I think that does help me kind of just, I don't know, there's just this calming energy. And I think that
Yeah.
helps me get into my body. I do like music. I like music. I like dance, like any movement, whether it's
Yeah. Just
Pilates or
like,
dancing,
yeah,
that
getting
gets
it
me in my
out.
body. It
Yeah.
moves the energy. There's
Yeah.
something about like walking,
Yeah.
dancing,
Yes.
movement, of any kind,
Yes.
is another easy tip. Let's see what else is helpful in the day to day. Writing, journaling.
Yeah.
Um, that's another easy one where it doesn't even like, I mean, if you saw the notes that I was taking of channeling, like this is just like, you can't see it,
I
but
can't. Yeah.
it's literally, no, it's not gonna work. It's chicken scratch. Like
Yeah.
it's like, it's just writing whatever comes to your head sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't have to make sense of it, but you don't know
Yeah.
what you're also just moving the energy out of your
Yeah.
body, if that answers at
Yeah, and
all.
I feel like it's really cool that you said all that because it kind of connects back to all the things that you love to do and that you do regularly as being just like a multidisciplined person that has allowed yourself to expand into doing things that you love because it sounds as though that like when you had something like the energy or emotion of grief, you didn't do, which I did do for many, many years. I let it paralyze me. I was in a state of depression for until I didn't even know this until I was like 40. Like I was so uneducated about all of this. And I only recently, like I didn't know that you could take an emotion and create art with it. You could express it that way. Like it's not just breathing, it's not just like you could actually flow it out of you that way. That's why I love what you just said, because it sounds like that's what you have been doing, and that's almost like not only just been the healing piece for you, but also allowed you to explain, like expand into those multiple disciplines that you now know that
100%.
you love to do regularly. Does that make sense?
I know it, and it's so funny because I think one of the first instances of that was writing poetry, and that's where my
Mm.
first poetry book came out of, right? So
Wow.
it
Wow.
was going through, a
Wow.
very stressful time at work, and it's an HR professional. Like a lot of people turned to us in COVID to like, what do we do? How do we
Yeah.
navigate? How do we be
Yeah.
there, right? And at the same time, I'd lost my uncle Bobby to suicide. 3 weeks later, I lost my cousin Tom to COVID, and then I was having all these like OCD flare ups. To your point, I didn't know I lived with some of it to begin with. So now it's amplified. It's like a fire that just kind of was ravaging, where you're paralyzed and you don't even know what's right from wrong. You think you are your thoughts, and some of them
Mhm.
are very
Yeah.
violent thoughts and negative,
Yeah.
and so you have that. And I just started writing how I felt. Like I wasn't thinking, and it turned into poetry, which then turned into the book that I created, which I learned I love to write poetry, which ironically I used to write when I was younger, like, 11, 12, and I stopped because it wasn't the cool thing. Like, nobody wanted to say they wrote poetry, or it's like, is it good enough, or all these things. And being able to pick that back up. So I think the other message I would tell people is to exactly what you said, but also like sometimes we do things when we're kids or young that we don't think anything of and we forget about, but there is something much deeper there of why we were drawn to it. And
Oh,
when we're
yes.
younger, we don't have all those thoughts, as many thoughts, I should say, because we do. We might not have all those constrictions or, norms, so to speak, that we more easily pick up as adults. And so that was interesting too, to see some stuff come full circle,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the poetry, and then turns
Yes.
into something that, to your point, now it's a published book. Now it's
Yeah.
something I share
Yeah.
or I talk about or pay forward. So,
Yeah.
very interesting how this conversation is just
Yeah.
diving
And
into
you're
everything.
posting it like all the time. You post the most beautiful poetry, and it grew from that experience, and I mean, I first off, it sounds like, the healing is you just representing your inner child
Done
and
so
bringing
much inner
her,
child work. There's definitely
just,
been
yeah,
finding
bringing
that
her out.
place,
Yeah.
finding them again. That's self-love though. That
Yes.
for me,
Yes.
that was the big part of my self-love, was coming
Yes.
into connection with who I truly was, which I view that little person as like who I always was, but maybe didn't allow to shine. And it's like
Yes.
letting her out of her kind of little cage, or that I kind of put in, or only allowed certain parts of her to come out at certain points in time. Um, and I think it takes time to get comfortable, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm talking about it more freely, but if you would have asked me to do this 4 years ago, no, I would have been so concerned of what's work going to think? What
Right.
is this person going to think? What do I even think of this? Do I even
Right.
feel worthy of this? And so
Right.
it's allowing ourselves the grace to have all of those feelings and allow it to unravel over again. Get rid of time, because
Yeah.
it does not matter how long or little it takes. I'm saying 4 years. Okay, there was deeper work going on longer than that. I'm just using this little bubble, but let's not even use time. Let's just say
Right.
these experiences all
Right.
led me to that, and they each have a place. And we don't understand that always going through. Again, we'll bring it back to the present candle because I'm looking at it. We don't always understand the present, but when we get to the autumn, the end of the cycle where we're looking backwards,
Hmm.
does make so much sense. Like
Yeah.
truly. And that's
It
why I love
always,
that idea of
yeah.
cycles and seasons.
Yes.
And
It is all cyclical. And like Mo and I were just saying this in the car the other day, that he thought he was supposed to be now looking for a certain kind of role, and it was never working out. Like he kept on attracting things that he didn't want, things that would keep him like on a plane all the time. Like he was like, why am I not ever and yet all of the time he's coding and programming and basically like building products as a hobby just all the time. And that's what he did at the beginning of his career until he
Interesting.
was kind of told, well, now you're supposed to take the headphones off and manage. You know what I mean? And if you don't do that, then like there's something wrong with you. Like you're just, that's the natural progression of being in the corporate world for you. And he gave himself the permission to say that that's okay, that I can do that. I can allow myself
1000%.
to just keep creating and not even know why, but know that for like somehow in some way everything will get figured out on his own. And just this week he started getting opportunities coming to him for being something that's like called like he's never even seen this before. It's like a founding engineer, like someone who codes but also
Yes.
can run like both. And
Yeah,
he
for
never even
sure.
knew. And he goes, all of this is just a cycle. He's like, if we are tied to like linear growth, we will never ever grow and we will always fall short because we'll always think, as we said before, we're supposed to be something by then. When in actuality, he just cycled back to the beginning and is
That's what he
exactly
always
where he
wanted
was
to
always
do.
supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's funny because, in part of my role, I don't do it as much anymore, but in recruiting, right? So when we recruit for roles, a lot of times I always tell anybody that either asks for advice or even when I'm recruiting, it's like it's not just finding out if the candidate's the right fit for the company. Is the company the right fit for the candidate? And that is anything in
Mm,
life, right?
yeah,
Is the
yeah,
opportunity a right fit for you and is it a right fit for the opportunity? And
right,
so in those times when, it's like, okay, this is what the company needed was for Mo to manage, that's not aligned anymore. And that is
right,
okay for both sides to part
right,
because think of it like
right.
those contracts, right? It's like, okay, that contract has ended or that
It's
opportunity has
over.
ended and it's now
Yeah.
time. And if we looked at it more objectively like that, I think it's easier to part, right? Because there's that
Yes.
emotional element of us
Yes.
being human that we're like, we have to make it work.
Oh yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
realizing, no, you don't have to make it
Because
work.
I'm a man and I should be this, this whole concept. And I'm simplifying this whole process because it's been a year-long process for him of letting go of this programming of who he thought he was meant to be. And it had lower chakra, like back pain, like all different things that come up. But it's
And
allowing,
that's how another thing to interrupt what we talked about, like your
yeah,
body, like how do
yeah,
you get into your body? Your body's always going to give you signs if
always.
you listen to it. So, for example, when something doesn't feel right, something's gonna like kind of be in your body not right, right? So for me,
Yes,
before all this
yes.
kind of happened, I had a lot of stomach issues. It's like
Mm.
going to doctors, no one could figure it out. The allergist literally told me to quit my job. And I was like, I know you mean so well. I know you mean well. However, I don't have the liberty to just do
Wow.
that. So, but like I got
That's
what like it was like
insane.
if it's stressing you out so much, maybe this
Yeah.
isn't for you. But
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
somebody that's going through and not feeling good, at the time, it was like it's like I need the answer I needed. And I think that moment actually made me realize like nobody's going to have an answer. I need to get into my
Right.
body. I need to figure it
Right.
out. And I actually went the more holistic route as I went to like a more holistic nutritionist that works with supplements, that works on, understanding the connection in your body. And that was what was right for me. And I think that's just kind of wanted to say like what Mo was feeling, like your body will give you signs. Just it, and they're small. I think that's why people are like, how do you know? It's like you got to just kind of listen to them or pay attention. And once you acknowledge one, you're going to notice how many more you see.
Oh
So it's
yeah.
like you
Oh
see
yeah.
number signs, or like a lot of times people are with me, I'm like, oh, did you see the time or did you see
Yeah.
this sign? And then
Yeah.
after they're with me, because they saw one, they're going to start like it's just
And they
opening
start,
yourself
yes.
up to the
Yeah. You
idea.
open your awareness.
And that's the
That's
same thing with your body.
yeah, it's so incredibly important that people really take to heart what you're saying because if we don't do that, and I think we talked a little bit about this on the prep call because I didn't do it. Like I for a number of years would have tightness in my chest. I mean, it turned into, high blood pressure and it was just anxiety. that I was ignoring. And like I never knew that I could stop and actually find out what that was and what it was representing and be able to create a new way of being. And I think instead a lot of us turn to medication, not numbing out with alcohol, eating, because we don't want to feel those feelings because we
And we
think
don't know
there's
how
something
to
wrong with
release
us.
them.
Yeah.
And we don't, and when you're told that like you don't have anything, then you start to think that you're making it up. Like, how much of that?
Right.
How much of it
Right.
was I'm making it up, where it got to the point where, yeah, similar to you, it's like I had GERD at 22 years old, which is like so uncommon, and like an
Right.
ulcer. And, yes, maybe it's stress, but what about, not the stress of not figuring out why I'm feeling a certain way, leading into this vicious cycle of it's never going to get better, right? Acknowledging that, okay, maybe we don't know what it is, but it's not in my head. I'm not making it up.
Right.
And now I feel
Right.
this way, and
Right.
not having a solution out that's going to minimize that is going to just make it worse. And I'm never going to feel better. Right. And
Right.
so there's
Right.
always that kind of connection of like, oh, the stress brought on physical symptoms, but sometimes there is a small physical symptom that goes under like not, addressed right away, which then leads to the stress and then leads to that. So like there's
Yes.
many
Yes.
ways to look at it, and each person is unique, and um it's not easy. And I think a lot of people in our realm that we've met and moving into this kind of shift in collective, a lot of us have had physical symptoms,
Yeah.
and an experience of people, mentioning, well, we can't find it, so it doesn't exist. Especially
Right.
when I was young, it was like, oh, you're young, you're just making. I had to bring my mom to a doctor with me to reiterate kind of what I was feeling. So it's not just me saying, oh, it's my anxiety that I'm just making up, or it's,
Right.
maybe it's asthma. And
Right.
then having to go to a nutritionist, like, no, that's not normal that you can't run at 20 something years old. And I've never been
Right.
able to run properly without like not breathing. So it's
Wow.
it's interesting. Listen to your body. I think not that we could, not giving medical advice or anything, not, a professional to do so, but I think that's what it's taught me is like, listening, following that, finding the right support, whatever that might be. Again, it wasn't what I initially thought it was going to look like, but somebody was able to help me in the way that I needed, and I feel better.
Yeah, that's everything. And I know that you talked about before, kind of being like brave enough to be able to shine your light in multiple different facets, and become someone who's a channel, you're intuitive, you read energy fields. I mean, it's like the list goes on with all of what you're doing on the spiritual side. Like it's almost like endless, versus the other side of you, which I'm realizing is really all just one, um, shows up at work. And, do you apply that at work?
More recently, yes. And it's
Yeah.
actually interesting because in the book I was referencing, Light is the New Black, Rebecca Campbell talks about how she was also in the like a creative industry. And the more she started showing up as her true self and bringing in that stuff that she thought wasn't going to be accepted, she was doing better at work. And
Yes.
so for me, I'm finding the more that I am in tune with that, or not afraid to say, I had this feeling, or, a lot of times in my line of work, you have to have a certain level of judgment. I'm not saying that I use that to ever make decisions, but I might say, okay, what is that telling me? Let me use that to go find more research. Let me use this to kind of talk to the person. But a lot of times, being able to pick up on an energy, I'm able to ask a question or really be there for a person a different way, where they're like, how did you just know I wasn't feeling right today? Right. And if I completely
So
shut
good.
it down, I'm not
Yeah.
you right. Let's say I'm
Yeah.
not using it, in the same, I'm never going to tap into someone's energy without their permission. I'm never going to read to them. But sometimes you get on a call in my line of work and you're working with someone, you could just tell something's off. And so I might just ask like a different question, or I
Yeah.
might, do something a little bit less, corporate-y, where, I might ask them, how are you really doing? Something very
Mm.
simple. And it opens that door. And it's like, if I didn't listen to at least a little nudge of that intuition coming through, I wouldn't have been able to hold the space in the same way. Or just doing your research, like, we're talking more spiritual side, but just our work in AFSP and learning how to navigate that. Like I can bringing that to work, talking more about
Yeah.
my own experience at work has helped others feel more comfortable or talk about their own, experiences or things of that nature. So it's really just owning any aspect of you and
Yeah.
in an appropriate way, of course, but it does allow you to kind of just show up as yourself. Where just yesterday, they do this like, it's really cute. This one group I support, they have where they like use AI to like make an image of you that the team has to guess which member on the team it represents. So they ask you
Oh,
things
that's
like,
awesome.
so it's like, what's your favorite animal? What are your three favorite things? What's your favorite city, right? And so, listing those out. And normally I would just keep it like, oh, I'm going to keep it so corporate. But I actually was like, no, like Pilates, tarot,
Oh, good
spirituality,
for
crystals.
you. Good for
And
you.
I showed that and like I posted it and the amount of people are like, this is so cool, or like I didn't know that about you. And we just had so much more deeper conversations.
Yes.
And so it was very validating. Maybe it happened in the time it was because I just happened to be picked yesterday as the person, right? Out of all the people in the group. And I saved the image. It's actually the cutest
Wow.
image I've ever seen. But it
Oh,
allowed me for once to feel like I was my own block. That's probably the other biggest thing with
yes.
self-love, or I was my own block thinking that
Yes.
people wouldn't accept me. And sometimes they don't. I'm not going to lie to you. I know that there's different experiences that, people don't. But I was so fearful that they wouldn't, that I wouldn't even try to share that because I was so
Right.
worried, oh my God, they're going to be like, she's into crystals. And not that I push that on anybody, but it's just part of me. And just having it and opening the conversation, I love it. Having it opening the conversation, I think allows me, and it's funny you did that. It's bringing me to, I pulled like a clear quartz one.
Ooh, I love
And what
that
I had
so
written about
much.
it, what I had written about it was where I feel like anything I wrote, I just like cannot find what needed. But essentially, it was like that clarity. It was
Hmm.
like, yeah, clarity and amplified energy. So the minute that I just stood, like when you stand in your own and you just feel like you trust in yourself and you have that self-love and you're not as concerned with the comparison or those thoughts that people aren't going to, it's kind of bringing full circle everything we talked about, right? It brings that clarity and abundance and you feel
Yeah.
that within yourself
Yeah.
and others feel that, right?
Yes.
Feel that
Yes.
energy. So it's funny, like that was something
That is
that
so
I pulled.
crazy. And it's such a contagious energy. And I feel like it's such an opposite energy of what most folks are experiencing, especially when they come to work. So for everyone to kind of feel like, wow, she's like showing her other side, which is really just who you are as a whole person. Again, it's inspiring because so much of the corporate world has really programmed us to show up as just kind of like this perfect version that's like a mask, like we're like wearing a mask of who we're meant to be. And we don't really bring all of those other parts with us, and I think that that's what we're missing. I think as we're looking to create a new earth and co-create together, that it only happens when we bring all of our pieces of ourselves to the table and we're brave enough to reveal that. So it kind of like leads me to my next question. And I know we're coming up on time. So after that, I'll only have one other question. But
That's okay.
um, you when I had that session with you, which was so transformative, and Bobby came through. And I really can even just feel him just even right now that I just said that when I remembered his name last night, I could feel him again. And I got like messaging in my sleep because of that, which I'll go into later. But
I felt him yesterday too, which is like, it's making me emotional because I
uh,
actually posted about my tattoo, which is, for my journey. You're not going to see it, but it's a butterfly with a semicolon. And it was for like my journey and his journey. So that's why I posted it on my social media yesterday. And I literally wrote to Francesco in the morning. I was like, I feel Bobby today. Like,
oh my
I feel him
God.
every day, but I said, I feel like he's hugging me. I feel like this overwhelming, presence today. And the fact that you were feeling him too, like it moves me. It's gonna make me emotional because it's just so beautiful that I know he's part of this journey, but
Oh
when
yeah.
others validate that back,
Yeah.
it's just beautiful.
I so can you explain to everyone what happened to Bobby, who he is to you now, and how he shows up in sessions? Um, and like, do you share that with people at work? Like, I want, you know what I mean? Like, because I
Yeah.
feel like it's such a part of who you are. And it was so healing for me. Like even so last night I dreamt like it was so weird. Like I for some reason I felt his energy when I was sleeping. I don't know why. I think because I was feeling into this call and it was he was showing me two grown men who hadn't lived what they now know their greatest potential in life, like what life really could have been for them. And he was like showing me them, like that they came back because they know that and they want to have that now in this life. And when I woke up in the morning, I was like, what does that mean? So like I wrote it down and it just came to me that so my two boys, one is my mom's brothers died. I'm named after one. He was Alan, so I'm Alana, and he died while she was pregnant with me. And my older son is a carbon copy of him even down to the way that he likes to play poker and plays basketball and they look alike. I mean, it's
Wow.
just and my younger son is a carbon copy of my Uncle Jeffrey who passed away. I just saw a blue light in his early 50s of pancreatic cancer. And I don't want to spend too much time going into what I know that they needed to transcend in their next life, but it has been communicated to me through spirit many times that they are them.
I was going to say, I completely feel
You
that.
feel that? And he
Yeah.
was like validating that last night that they knew that like I should know that there's that eternal version of them that knows that that's why they're here.
That's beautiful. I
Yeah.
think for me, that also shows like, Bobby's still anybody that comes in my life usually knows his energy right away and he stays with them. I think that's kind of like,
Yes.
a
Yes.
lot of people, it's like, oh, like, you have this energy or you help people, but it's not just me. I feel like we're a tag
Yeah.
team and that, it's not just me that you're getting in those sessions.
Yeah.
Like he was just such a kind soul that just wanted to, help other people, your biggest cheerleader. Like the amount of times he would be like sending me notes about how good I looked or how, like, just anything, how proud he was. And the fact that he's still doing that or providing that is just, it's beautiful because it's like you could talk about him in the present,
Yeah.
which is so nice. So we did lose. So my uncle Bobby was my uncle Fabio's partner. I shouldn't say is because, clearly he's still like here.
Still
He's not
hanging
physically with
around.
us.
Yeah.
But he passed away due to suicide early on in 2020. There's definitely battles we didn't see that he was facing. And I think, for me, that was a connection because I was dealing with a lot of my own battles. And I think I always felt like he was there for me, guiding me through that so that I wasn't alone. Um, Even if I was physically alone, I felt like he was there kind of always as my cheerleader. And, he's one of the first guides I think I connected with
Yeah.
very early on,
That's what I was
partly
going to ask
because
you. Like, had you had that experience before? This was like the first that kind of brought you into the realm of understanding that there are energies around us that are here to support.
I always knew that. I've always, like, as a child, I've always felt very connected to my dad's mom, which was very odd because I've never met her. She died when my dad was like 15, but I have her middle name. And I've always felt like I remember vividly, I didn't make sense. Now it makes sense. I was like maybe like five, I know, very young. I made her a card on her birthday. Like I just was so set, like she was gonna get this
Mm.
card. And not like my dad was probably like, what's like
Yeah.
he was probably moved, but like, why is my young child making a card for my dead mother? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. And
like I
she's been
never
dead for
asked him
so
about that.
long. Yeah, it's
But
not
yeah,
like, yeah,
so I made this card and I've always felt connected. And throughout my life, I think my first experience with that, I've been exposed to death at a very young age. I
yeah.
have a very big
Same.
family, and my parents would bring me to um, the wakes and the funerals. And so I kind of got exposed to that very young, which
Mhm.
I think helped me kind of understand that my family is very connected. Like I have family members that are also kind of mediums and have those gifts. So I've been exposed, I think, and hearts were something. So from a young age, I was always receiving heart signs to the point where other people started noticing when they were around me, there'd be these hearts. Oh, like it's just always something. I'm seeing them
We
constantly.
had it in the prep call,
We
remember?
had it in the prep call. Yeah,
Yeah.
the random
It
like
was
on the
so
phone.
weird. Yeah. It was
So
really
I
weird.
just get a lot of hearts. And so I think it was more for Bobby, it was more I recognized I have those gifts or I can talk to that person. And I think because we had that connection in real life, it became a little bit easier to recognize the voice, the energy, so I think he actually really helped me unlock those gifts. And
Wow.
clearly now we're kind of this tag team. I feel like I like can feel him,
Yeah.
like we're this tag team that, just wants to bring life. And it's interesting you said like two grown men not living to their fullest potential. Like I always think of Bobby of like he always felt like he wasn't living to that. He
Mm.
wanted to do more, didn't know how to do more. The thoughts kind of took that on. And so, that's why it's so important for me that I always am like, I'm sharing his story or all the good or how we still do that because he is living out that potential in a different
Yes.
way. And so,
Yes.
like, when you said that for me, it was also very
Yes.
validating that he is able to still live that out. And,
But that's
um,
amazing that you said that because when I first had the dream, I woke up in the middle of the night and I didn't write it down right away. Like it woke me up. It was like the middle, maybe it was 2 a.m. And I first felt like it was about him. And I was like, why is he telling me that?
so
But
he had a partner before that did pass away due to cancer. So his first partner passed away. And then Bobby had himself passed away, actually. So that's another kind of connection. I think it was a
that
personal
feels,
experience
yeah, but that
that he was
fit.
sharing with you.
Yeah, and it was so part of the dream was there were like two men, one at a time, showing themselves in a mirror to me. And I think that's where I got the understanding that it was now about those boys. Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
like that was like
I have chills.
so mind
I have
blowing.
chills. Tends to talk. And I actually
Yeah.
wrote the other day on one of my notepads like this. I literally wrote go off queen. And that was like, I told you I've been feeling an energy shift. And I feel like he was telling me like, you're like, this is it, like go off. This is like shine. It's one of
Wow.
those things. And so if he's doing that for you too, it must be a validation that's lifting a weight. It's almost like it probably was something weighing on you without you even knowing.
Yes.
And it's just
Yes.
validating
That's
of
exactly how
what's going
I
to be
felt.
next.
And it blows my mind that, first of all, I feel honored even that I could feel him when I was sleeping. And that in the session that you had with me, that he was able to speak with my grandma. Um, because like you, have experienced so much death in my life. Like I lost like basically my whole extended family. Like I mean it's been years that I haven't had them because they were just older, and then we lost a lot of younger folks too. And I wanted them so badly. Like I was so lonely leaving corporate, going through some kind of weird transformation that like they're the ones that came to me because I could feel like a remembrance of their energy and I could welcome them in. But what I haven't been able to do, even though I can always feel them around me, like it's like at any time I could feel them around me. Like like it's amazing how they just circle me. I don't receive like specific messaging, and I know maybe I'm not supposed to, and everyone's different, the way that you do, and the way that he was able to talk to my grandma. And another friend of mine who's similar to you has said, well, you just need to ask, you just need to listen more. Like I've been trying for a long time, but um, I guess, it leads me to kind of just understand like what is the mechanism behind it for you then to actually hear.
So it's funny, my throat chakra is closing up a lot. And so it's probably working with your throat chakra and the expression and the communication. Like it's very dry. It really kind of hurts.
Oh
Which
my God, I'm
is
sorry.
no, it's fine. So like for
It
me,
happens
like
when
your
you're
example,
empathic.
it's what I think everybody experiences differently, like I was explaining, and maybe this is why it's coming up. We have many different ways to connect to the other side, right? The one that is most common is clairvoyant. You see, and you could like, I don't even have that. Like I sometimes see like shadows, but
Mhm.
that's about it. And I can't see, there's no direct community.
Right.
Sometimes in dreams, but not even as much.
Right.
You actually are more clairvoyant in that sense with the dreams, and it's very vivid, right?
I get a lot of
So
dreams.
that's how it's
Yeah.
showing up for you. So you
Yeah.
already are, that's your kind of
Right.
way. So
Right.
it's finding the way that makes sense for you. Sometimes I hear,
Mm.
sometimes I write. So a lot of times when I journal to connect, because
Yeah.
what happens is when I start writing in all caps, I've
Mm.
learned that that is me channeling the message that
Wow.
so it's, you could use tarot cards, you can use songs. Bobby and I communicate like so much through songs. Like there's certain songs that I immediately know he sends me when I put my phone on shuffle,
Yeah.
or when I had lost loved ones back to back, this before I lost the second one, so it was within a week period, but so that week leading up to the second passing, this song, it was on the radio, and it's my favorite song like ever, but it's
Mm.
old, and why would it play on the radio? It's from like 2003. I know old is,
Yeah.
that's
Right,
but
right. It's
to be
not
on
that
the
old. What?
radio, to be on the
Just
radio,
random. Just
and then it
random.
played
Yeah.
twice in one day,
Wow.
twice in one day, and it's Never Leave You is the name of the song.
Wow.
And so it was the message of I'm still here. Like it was the most beautiful validation. And so I think the biggest lesson I've had is, we sometimes think we want it a certain way.
Yeah.
It's so funny. That's the tree reference. We want the gifts others might have that look so shiny and beautiful, but
Yes. That's the tree
ours,
reference.
it's the tree reference, but we all, it's going to show up differently, and it's going to change
Yeah.
over time. So for me,
Yeah.
when it started, it was just like the feelings, it was just the writing, then it turned into hearing, which Bobby was easy for me because I know his voice, but you start to pick up others, right? It could be the shadows, it could be sometimes auras, it's very rare, but sometimes I
Right.
see colors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
whether it
That
is
I see. Yeah.
whether it's on a
And
person, or if I'm just
yeah.
drawn, like being drawn to a color is just
Yeah.
as telling you of a sign. Being drawn to things, the amount of things I pulled for this or that took me. So an example was like the message was something out of reach, but it's right in front of you. How I got
Mm.
that message was I was literally climbing and scaling something to grab something that I thought I wanted, but that's not, the message was no. I actually was then taken to the crystal I just showed you that
Right.
was right in front of me. So the message
Right.
was, keep striving really high, but know that it's right in front of you. Know that you're right where you need to be, but don't stop striving, right? So finding how, and just being open to that. It's a
Yeah.
self-love and self-trust first allowed me that when these come in, I'm not doubting I'm making it up anymore. In the beginning, I did. I was like, I probably was always doing this. As a kid, I would just know
Right.
things,
Right.
right? Somebody asked me, do you remember one? And I remember the one that really started making me question was in high school, where I'm like, this is not something I think happens to others. And it actually made me shut down more because I thought I was weird. But
Right.
we
Right.
had this Italian exam, and we never have a final exam ever. She just decided to give us one. And she's like, you have to study everything. I don't know what was into that, but she was like, you need to study everything from the full school year. And this is us at like 15, 16. We're like, what do you mean? Like, we're not in college. So I remember being at a softball game with my friends, and we were talking. They're like, I'm so nervous. What are you studying? And I said, I am studying this one sheet of paper. From the whole
From
year,
all
I
of
took the
them.
one sheet of paper and I
Yeah.
said, front and back, I'm memorizing this. Now, this teacher was very tough. I never got 100 on it. She would find something wrong with my English. Was it Italian? But she would mark me wrong if I did something wrong in English. So, and I said, I'm studying this. And they're like, no, you can. I'm like, I cannot explain to you. This is like, I'm just studying this. We get to the test. The test is that front and back, that sheet of paper. I'm not even joking you, to a T.
Wait, it was
The
like the
first,
one that you studied? It was
the
exactly
one
that.
front and back, the whole
Oh my God.
match for what it was. And that's the one time I got 100 in that class. And that was the start of my intuition. But back, and then, my friends were like, what is that? And now it's a little bit more common to talk about these things, but this is going back over 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
it was definitely something of like, what the hell? Like, how did you
Yeah.
know? Did you cheat? Did you that? Like,
Wow.
it was like, and then so there was that. So I kind of shut that
Yeah.
experience down. But whenever anyone asks me, like, those little moments you've probably
Yeah.
already had are your intuition, right?
Oh
Because there's no
yeah.
way I would have known out of all the material, it's one page. And the one time I got 100, it was like that other like that other validation of like, yeah, you listened, like you were connected. So for you, I feel like just listen to your dreams. I think journal
Yeah.
more. Whatever you're close to. Like for me, Bobby and I loved music. Like there are certain, like Beyonce, he loved Beyonce. So I know when a random Beyonce song comes on, it's almost like his little
It's
like
him.
note to me.
Yeah.
And it's really
Yeah.
sweet because my favorite Beyonce song is Halo. And it's taken a bigger meaning now because he's passed on. It's like
Yeah.
he's my angel. So I always say that's kind of his song. And lately when I'm in moments that are, I'm feeling really like happy or something is happening in my life, the song comes on. So recently I went to Montreal for the first time to go visit my boyfriend and meet his family. And I'm on this plane and I'm getting off the plane and my phone, again, I just left it on shuffle and I'm getting off the plane and Halo comes on.
Oh my
And
God.
I just start almost like bawling because so it's like they do give you those signs and asking for like I said, like we love Beyonce. I'm like, oh, you're gonna talk to me through Beyonce? Like, let's do this. So it's like kind
Yeah.
of just making that kind of
Yeah, yeah,
agreement and
yeah.
being open to when it's gonna happen, right? In that moment, I wasn't thinking about that. I'm thinking about many different things, excited, a little nervous, a little all, like I'm in a different country. Like this is a big thing. And
Wow.
he sent me the sign in that moment. And so I think everybody that's listening to this, and everybody is intuitive. Everybody
Yes.
it's
Yes.
a matter of stretching the skill. And
Yeah.
if you want to, and what you want that to be, right? You could use tarot cards to ask a question and pull that. Oracle cards is what I started with because it's a little bit easier sometimes to just have the message already built and
Mhm.
just go with what calls to you.
If you could envision a new earth and kind of just manifest it in the way that you believe it should be, what would you envision?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I
It's
think
a big
before I go
one,
into
right?
that, it's like with the religion thing, I think just wanted to like say for me, like I don't know if I'm ever going to maybe fully believe in what one's saying or the other, but I think what this conversation has brought up and it ties into the new earth is there's never going to be one answer for me in my
Right.
perspective. I
Right.
never think it's going to be, that one group has the right thought or another. I think what I've learned and I think what I hope to bring is the idea that there's probably right. There's probably truth or some validation in many different
Yeah.
perspectives that I'm going to be careful with that hope to bring about kindness, that have beautiful intentions, that are, driving that forward. I think it's going to be a little bit of everything. I think it's very human to want to have like this is the new, idea or this is the new philosophy or the new belief
Mm.
on what is right or wrong. And I think the more kind of went into my journey, I think what I would hope for this new collective is that we are just open to
Yeah.
continuing to change our minds, to experience, to learn, to love in a way that brings the most kindness and positivity and happiness to people, like just this good energy. And I think that could be my number one strength. Clifton strength is learner. So it could just be that coming through.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that's what I would hope because that brings about change. And
Yeah.
not to reference that book for like the third time, but
Yeah.
the think again, that's what they talk about is that idea of constantly learning. And that is when change comes about or transformation, right? Pushing those boundaries. Where does innovation come from? It comes from being willing to try something new, to think maybe I'm wrong, to think
Yeah.
maybe there's another point of view, to think how do I push this initial thought that we just talked about. For me, it's like you share that with me. I'm like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, but I want to research that. I
Right.
want to see what else I
Right.
could see on that. What is that going to help me bring about in a different way that's completely separate from religion, but maybe it's
Right.
it's going to teach me something that I can then help somebody else with. How do I build my tool set or skill set? And I think that's what's going to be big in the new collective is everything we've talked about from different perspectives and pulling that into different gifts and acknowledging we all probably have many and how do we bring
Yeah.
that forward,
Yeah.
tapping into our minds, our bodies, our soul, just that I think is what I would hope for the new collective is more of that and more people feeling that they have a place in that, right? I think that's not good where I'm going to leave it. It's like we all have a place in it, whether we know it or not. And that's going to be beautiful to see more and more people kind of recognize that.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time, and I cannot thank you enough for bringing your piece of the puzzle or your multiple puzzle pieces. This has been absolutely amazing. You are amazing, and your energy is just beautiful, and I'm excited for it to be felt by as many people as possible.
Thank you for having me. This was what I love the most, I think, about this discussion was how much each of us were able to kind of also help each other through
Yeah,
that. And I think that's
yeah,
what's so powerful in a lot of these conversations is bringing different perspectives, energy. I think at one point, validating a life experience for you, validating a life experience for me. And I
Yes.
hope that can do that for anybody listening as well. So
Yes.
just thank you for thinking of me and creating such a safe space and really ushering in this new collective, because I
Yes.
think you're providing a platform for more people to speak about it, which in turn will bring it into, reality, into the physical world.
Thank you so much. I feel like the more we speak it, the more it gets created in real time. So thank
Absolutely.
you so much for joining. I so appreciate
Yeah.
it.